Yeah. Nah, I'm playing. There's no music playing, man. I'm just joking. Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, cool. So, like I said before, we do have Shakhriyar Mamedyarov playing Wesley. So, in that first round, and they didn't have to go to a playoff. So this is the round 1, game 4 between them two. And it's pretty nice. It has a lot of, I always try to find like different things that I can talk about in games. I don't like to talk about the same thing every time. I like for there to be new concepts and new ideas and stuff like that coming up. And this game does have that. So it's nice. But of course, for all my people in the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Kamusta na aking makaibigan. Maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking mga video. Mabuting pagbati, ingat lagi. I appreciate you guys very much. We are going to see who is malakas in this one. Is it Wesley So or is it Shakhriyar Mamedyarov? It's really both of them, man, you know, at the end of the day. But anybody who is coming from Azerbaijan, I will say salam to you and chak sagol. And I will get, in the future, if I remember, I will get another phrase like how are you or something like that in Azerbaijani. But fear not. I know I have some people from Azerbaijan watching, so I got you. But if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. So we got knight to f3. We see d5. We have e3. Knight comes to f6, b3, e6, and then we have bishop to b2. And this is actually the Réti opening. It is the Nimzowitsch-Larsen attack. Now, I want to show you guys like the normal way that you actually get to this position. So we'll just back up all the way to the beginning of the game. You normally see b3 first. And then you can see d5, and then you can see bishop to b2, e6, knight coming to f3, knight to f6, e3. So, you know, this is a transposition. Of course, it doesn't have to go this way. It can go many different types of ways, but you can still end up in the same position. But, you know, it's basically just a b3 type of an opening, just with a different move order. So, like I said, we did have this position here after those moves. And then we do see bishop to e7. And then Shakhriyar... he says, man, we're not going to play a boring game at all. G4. Like G4, bro? Okay. G4. It's a very simple idea attached to it. I mean, if knight takes here, you know, you're looking at bishop taking G7, kind of knocking this rook off, affecting your ability to castle. So, I mean, that's pretty much what white is looking for. It's slightly better for black if that does happen, but after we see G4, we do have castles by black, and this gives white the next move to be able to play G5. Knight comes down to E4, and then we do have H4. So, Shakhriyar basically says, I'm not castling queenside, bro. I mean, we're not doing that because this attack is all the way over here. You know, he's not castling this side. I'll at least tell you that. He's not going that way. You can't castle after what you've just done. C5. We got d3, knight comes back to d6, knight b to d2, knight comes to c6, we got c4, and then we do have the novelty of the game, which is d5. This looks like a very crazy position. Basically, these pawns being pushed this early in the game with the king being dead center is going to give you a novelty pretty quickly. So, I mean, just throwing that out there, man, because not a lot of people... will play this way. And like I always tell you guys, this definitely violates a lot of the principles of the game of chess. It is much stronger for black in this position. Not winning, but it is definitely beneficial for black. So don't take from this game the way that you should play the game. Because if you play this way as white, I mean, if you lose the game, it's you. So listen to this advice. Pawn takes d4, pawn takes d4. We have queen to e2. And to Shakhriyar's benefit, I mean, he is a super GM. So at the end of the day, I mean, even if he does play something that's crazy, he usually has the understanding of chess to be able to at least play legitimately out of it. You know, so he is actually playing pretty soundly, and black just has a slight edge. We do have b5. Basically, black is castled. Black can go on attacks. So, I mean, one of the good ways to attack white's position is to push b5 and try to break down the structure, try to open some lines. And you'll see that'll become relevant later on. We do see bishop to g2. Bishop comes to b7. We got g6. And this move looks exactly like it looks. Okay, so I'm gonna explain to you what I mean by that. This move looks like it just throws away a pawn, and it does. It just there's no type of thematic. It's not breaking anything open or whatever. It's just basically throwing a pawn away, and it's very defendable. Basically, what Wesley So does from this is just defend perfectly. He just basically doesn't allow the game to become open. And so you should definitely look at the way Black is playing this. And this is a good example of how you should play the game when your opponent throws away material and is trying to open the position up, onto your castle position. So we do have pawn takes g6, and then we have h5. h5 is hoping that white can either capture here like this, or you're just going to go ahead and snap like this, and then the rook can take. So Wesley So passes the first test, and he pushes g5. He's trying to keep the position closed. He's up a pawn, so let's just keep the position closed. We have h6, and then we have g6. Because like I said, we are trying to make sure that we keep the position as closed as possible. And then the king is going to be coming to h7 to just blockade the pawn. We do see king over to f1. Craziness, and then we have king over to h7. And like I said before, this king is just going to be sitting in front of this this pawn forever, for the most part. I mean, this bishop doesn't really have any influence on this king. There really is no way for white to penetrate the position at all. So, I mean, Black has pretty much done everything that they needed to do, and they've weathered. I mean, it was kind of a crazy storm, but they definitely weathered the storm. Rook comes over to e1. We see pawn takes c4, pawn takes c4, and then we do have rook to b8. Like I said, Black is trying to open lines. They do have a really nice open diagonal. They have this rook that's about to become activated. So this bishop is not the most comfortable camper. But for a few, so what we actually see in the game is bishop backing up to a1. And some of you guys might be wondering, okay, wait a minute. So you have this bishop here. You have this knight attacking this pawn. Can't you just take the pawn? Yes. There are no tricks. And actually, it's been suggested for like at least one other time. So this is the perfect position for you to actually take this pawn, and bishop down to a1 basically makes it to where it's going to be almost impossible for you to now take this pawn. If we do see knight takes d4 in this position, the knight would take d4, the bishop would take d4, knight would take c4 with a little bit of a like discover tactic. But after pawn takes c4, queen takes d4, you do have bishop taking b7, rook taking b7, and then rook up to h3. And this actually is a much better position than what we actually see in the game. At least this rook is going to be able to kind of come over and try to get on the file. You definitely have some movability in this position. But after we see bishop to a1, Black says, I'm going to go knight to f5. And, I mean, now you have 3 pieces protecting this pawn. You never can take it. I mean, you can possibly try to play knight to b3, but I mean, you're just really, really tied down, and this bishop is just riding on a complete rock. I mean, the only thing the bishop can do is try to go back to the square that it was before. So, like I said, the position definitely has gotten very, and it's basically just those couple tempo, the couple tempi that white used to push his g pawn. But Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, he plays like this all the time, so this is nothing new. We do see knight to e4. We got g4, further knocking the pieces around. Knight f comes to d2. We see knight down to h4. Bishop, rook takes h4, bishop takes h4, and then we do see knight to c5. And, not only is white's position, like, miserable, like, I mean, they're in a very severe defensive mode, they've just given up in exchange. So, this is not nice to be looking at. So we do see bishop back to a8, and then we have queen taking g4. And we have actually reached a point in the game that if you do want to pause the video and see what Black has the ability to play here, to just basically just maintain their severe advantage, go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So this actually is relevant because there is a position that Wesley So allows himself to get into coming up, and it actually allows Shak to, really kind of jump back in the game a little bit. Not to be winning, but just for him to kind of be able to, win some material type stuff back. So in this position, to show you what actually happened in the game, we see queen down to g5. And this is encouraging a trade. But like I said, this is actually allowing black to get, or this is allowing white to get some of their material back. Because you guys know earlier that the exchange was given up by white. Queen takes g5, bishop takes g5, and then we see knight coming to f3, attacking this bishop. After the bishop takes on a6, we do see knight to b7. And this is actually a little bit inconvenient. You're not too worried. I mean, you're still ahead as black, but the game is much more even in this position, you know, than it was before. You're just really just down a pawn as white, but you definitely are going to have the ability to get this pawn back, which is what we actually eventually see in the game. But going back to, like I said, what we had after queen takes g4, and it's a really subtle move actually. Is actually bishop just back to e7. You know, attacking this undefended knight, you know, causing it like a little bit of, you know, discomfort, but making sure that we do not get forked here on d7. It actually ends up being, you know, quite a bit better, for black. So like I said, like I always say when I'm showing these games, always be making sure that you are looking out for your opponent's undefended pieces, because a lot of the times there is some type of attack or tactic that you know, you can exploit because of the under defense or the just like, you know, hanging of a certain piece. So definitely don't have you know, don't have undefended pieces in your own you know, thing. So if we kind of went through another move or two here, knight d would come to b3. The knight could come down to b4 and then rook to e2, and you can see pretty much all of white's pieces are kind of defending different things. This bishop is still kind of bad, so you know it's not the most comfortable position to be in. But like I said, we did see knight up to d7, so one of the rooks is going to be dropping off the board. Bishop comes back to g7. Knight takes on f8 with check. Rook takes on f8, and we do see rook over to b1. We see bishop to f6. We got knight down to d2, trying to redirect it over here to e4. We got the king over to g7. Knight comes to e4. Bishop comes back to e7. We do have a rook to b5, and then we have e5. And this is kind of evil. Like, this is kind of evil to the bishop. It's basically trying to say, hey, man, I never want you to move. You know, it's not really possible to kind of unwind your bishop simply because the a3 square is off limits because this bishop is protecting. So, I mean, it's not the nicest situation for your bishop to be in. We do see knight down to d2. We got f6. King comes to e2. We see rook over to c8. Bishop comes up to d5. We have knight back to d8. Bishop takes a8. Rook takes a8. We got f4. You know, I mean, to Shaq's credit, like I said, Shaq is really playing this game. Like, he's definitely getting himself out of a bad position. You know, this is a little bit rough, like for black, just a touch. I mean, they are definitely very much winning, but the situation is, I mean, you're kind of forced to take here, because if you don't, I mean, you're going to be looking at this, and that's going to be trading. You're going to be looking at putting a lot of pressure on this point. So, I mean, you know, it's just going to be pretty good for black, especially due to the fact that, you know, this king is on this diagonal, so that bishop can really come alive. So pawn takes f4, bishop takes d4. We see king over to f7. Bishop comes down to c3. We got g5. We got d4. We see g4. And, you know, like I say, past pawns must be pushed. So it's like there really isn't anything that's preventing this g pawn from really kind of going anywhere. So, you know, we got to try to take advantage of pushing that pawn as much as possible. All of these little pawn clump right here. Hook that up. So we do see d5. We're trying to make sure that, you know, our bishop has movability and stuff like that. We do see rook over to c8. We have bishop to d4. We got f3 with check, so the king comes up to d3. We see f5. So, I mean, you know, you guys can see this pawn, this little pawn structure is moving a little bit. And we do have c5, but c5 is actually an unfortunate move because it is actually very easy to push this rook away from the defense of this pawn. And Wesley so does that with a6. So, I mean, this rook is a little bit uncomfortable, and it cannot maintain its position. I mean, if you do try to move it over here, you know, you're going to be looking at some knight to b7 situations, just completely knocking it away from this this rank. So you basically pushed your pawn up without the ability to protect it. And I mean, black is just like, give me the pawn. You can pin. But you have a knight to b7, knight comes to b3, so something is going to have to give. But the focus for black is this this king side pawn clump. So even if you do give up an exchange, I mean, you're getting a lot for the exchange. Bishop takes on D4. We see rook taking C8. We see bishop back to E5. So, I mean, yeah, black is down in exchange right here, but, I mean, they have a lot. Knight comes down to D2. We see knight down to D6. Rook comes over to C6. We see A5, just protecting your pawn. We see A4. Bishop comes down to F4. You know, we're trying to eliminate counterplay that white might have. Knight comes to B3, and then we have G3. And, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but this is kind of scary to me. The bishop is holding this down. The pawn is holding this down, so the king doesn't have any way to even come over. We see knight to D4. We see F2. We got king to E2. Knight comes down to E4, and it's just like completely seals the deal. Everything on the screen is mating. I mean, every single option is mating. It's just like, do you want to get mated quick or do you want to get mated slow? We have D6, but unfortunately that doesn't do anything because this pawn is just way too slow. We got G2, and it is in this position that Shak does resign the game. Now, if we back up, instead of D6, like I said, you really don't have a whole lot of other options. Some of you guys might be thinking, well, can you just go king to F1? And I mean, and you can kind of prevent the pawn from moving and stuff like that. Nah, because that's actually mating like immediately quickly. After king comes down to F1, you're going to be looking at knight to D2 with check. And then, I mean, whether you go to E2 or you go to G2, you're going to be getting, you know, you're going to be getting smashed on. I mean, this is completely forcing the pawn through. So after the king moves, I mean, this is just automatically mate. So, I mean, this is like the quickest mate you can pretty much choose. So, you know, after knight to E4, even something like knight coming down to F3 is not possible. I mean, I just thought this was funny. This is what the computer is actually, one of the lines the computer is actually suggesting. After knight to E4, knight comes to F3, pawn pushes to G2, and it actually says knight to H2. It's like, it is so dire with these pawns being here that, I mean, you just literally throw the knight away. And then, I mean, you don't even take the knight, but you queen the pawn. So, nah. I mean, so there is a lot of power in pawns pushing to the 7th rank or the 6th rank. Whenever you have a passed pawn anywhere in your position, you always have to think, is there some type of something that I can do with this pawn, you know, that can result in something? I mean, if you can at all ever push the pawn, man. Hook it up. So that is that game. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Chak to my people in Azerbaijan. Mereming salamat aking makaibigan. I appreciate you guys very much, and I'll see you guys next time.